Hello, I'm Leonard Riggs Jr., and welcome to my podcast, From My Head to Your Ears. Today I'm going to talk about my mom. Her 91st birthday is February 3rd, 2023. I still have her. I'm her caregiver. She has Alzheimer's. And we've had quite the journey for the last few years as her disease progresses. She is still a very sweet, loving, funny person, even though she's bedridden now and she can't speak, but she still has a little glimmer in her eye and still smiles and still laughs. And I'm going to talk about some of my fond memories of my mom throughout my life and about the journey as a caregiver for my mother. So I'll be right back after a short break and we'll begin to discuss my mom. And I'm back. And as I've stated, my mom is celebrating a birthday on February 3rd, 2023, which is actually today as I'm recording this. She's going to be the ripe old age of 91, and she does have Alzheimer's, and she is bedridden, and she's pretty well in the late stages of Alzheimer's. She still laughs, and she's very cheerful. I'm very fortunate that she enjoys the little time she has. She laughs a lot, giggles, and makes little noises. But I love my mom with all my heart, and I'm proud to be taking care of her. When I was younger, I never really saw my mom as a person, so to speak. She was just my mom. You don't realize that they had a life before you, that they, went through school and went through all the heartaches and stress of growing up. And I mean, her life was a mystery to me. She really didn't talk about it too much when I was a kid. My grandma would come over and she would have these little anecdotes about how my mom was a little mischievous little child that would play practical jokes, which I couldn't believe because my mom was very religious and very stoic at times. She did have just a little hint of the sense of humor. She was funny, but she always felt like she had to kind of present herself in a way because she was Pentecostal and a church lady, a Sunday school teacher. So she was aware that she had to present herself in a certain way. And I just thought she was perfect when I was a kid, And my dad was 7 years older than him. They met in the 1950s. I'm not sure the exact date they met, but my dad had been married right after the war, World War II, and had a daughter and was separated for quite a long time without being divorced. And I met my mom at a skating rink. A mutual friend introduced them, and they hit it off immediately and began dating. My mom wasn't quite too sure at first about him because he liked to smoke a cigar and have a little drink, And she had gone through a brief marriage when she was 19 and had a daughter herself. But I believe her daughter, my sister, fell in love with him actually, and my mom still had a few reservations about dating my dad. He was an athlete, and he was a good looking guy, and my mom was gorgeous and built like Marilyn Monroe. So they were good-looking people. And my dad just had, suntan, black hair, dressed like a movie star, very athletic, and a show-off. And my mom didn't like that flashiness about him. She kind of turned her off a little bit. But she felt for him, and he got divorced. His divorce became final, and they got married, and in 1957, I believe. And my mom had met my dad's daughter, my oldest sister, Connie, and they all hit it off, and thus began the story of my life, my family's life, I should say. And my parents went on to have 2 girls after they got married, and my youngest sister, who is 6.5 years older than me, was born prematurely and weighed 2 pounds. My mom had a really rough pregnancy with that, and they didn't think my sister would live, but my sister fooled them. And in 1966, the surprise of the year happened, me. I was born December 21st, 1966, and I was the Christmas present of that year. And that's where I came in this story. And I was a big baby after my mom had a preemie, a 2-pound preemie. I was 10 pounds, 14 ounces, I believe, 21 inches long. I was almost as tall as my youngest sister, Cindy, already. And she was 6.5 years older than me. She was just a little tiny thing. I think my poor mom, I burst every vein in her leg when she was carrying me. I was huge. But my early life, my mom was very protective of me, and I was her baby. And I think she knew I was it. This is her last child. I think that's what made our relationship kind of special. That, me being the only boy. By the time I was born, my sister Connie was 18, and my sister Lori was, I believe, 13 or 14. So they were kind of doing their own things, and my sisters were in school. So my preschool years, I got to spend with my mom by myself, whereas my sisters always had somebody there. I treasure that time, and I remember a lot of it. My mom would take me uptown shopping, and we got to ride in taxi cabs because my dad would take the car to work. And I thought my town of Christopher, Illinois was huge. And my mom, she would do all her practical shopping, and I enjoyed going in the dime store, as we called it, a Ben Franklin store that had kind of all sorts of stuff in it, especially toys. But I hated going into the store called P and Hirsch because to me, it was just clothes. It had more to it than that, but I just remember the clothes and her looking through clothes for what seemed like hours. My mom really liked clothes a lot. She liked to dress her daughters up, and she liked clothes for herself. My mom was kind of a clothes horse. Even though she is Pentecostal, she wasn't always Pentecostal. She was raised Baptist, but when she became Pentecostal, she wore her dresses and had her hair up. But she wore her hair like Grace Kelly. Very glamorous, and she would dress nicely, and she always seemed like she was dressed up. My mom never had a hair out of place and always was neat. And then she had me, who's a total schlepper. I am like Pigpen. So I probably was quite the challenge for her as a child. But I was a good kid. I was very shy, extremely shy, actually. And I was well behaved for the most part. I had my moments, I'm sure. I just was scared of people and very introverted. I played by myself a lot as a child. And part of the reason was in the neighborhood I grew up with, there was a lot of girls, and they were all older. And I think one particular girl lived down the street, though, and she was a little bit older than me. And she became my first little girlfriend. And we disappeared one afternoon. And we hid in the neighbors. Well, they had a little shed that was a playhouse. And we got in there, and it had, a table and little toy sink and a little toy this and that. And we hid in there and played house all day. I freaked my mom out. I think I had a habit of disappearing as a child, though. But I wasn't that far. I think I ran away and ended up the street at the Catholic church school. And I remember knocking on the doors, and my neighbor, Harvey, caught me and brought me back home. That was back at a more innocent time when, I was all of 3 years old walking around the neighborhood. People didn't freak out as much back then because this was such a different world than we live in now. But it wasn't that she wasn't watching or she was a terrible parent. It's just she was either sewing or cooking or cleaning, or she just was very busy. And like I said, the world was different back in the late 60s, early 70s. The thought of someone kidnapping you wasn't even a thought. We knew all our neighbors, and you could pretty well sleep with your door unlocked and not even fret. But my mom, she got her GED, and she worked real hard. And at the time, I didn't understand how hard work that was, how hard of work that was. But she did it, and she got her GED, and I believe she wanted to take some college courses, but she never did. She got a job at the grade school as a lunchroom supervisor in the early 70s, and she ended up working in the grade school on and off for many, many, many years, and she became a full-fledged cook after I was graduated high school. She filled in the kitchen, the cooking part, a lot, and got her foot in the door. And finally, those state jobs, these people retire from there. You don't let a state job go. So being a cook, that's not a bad gig. A lot of good benefits, and she had the benefit of working when we were at school, and then being home for us when we got home, and then she would be off when we were off. If there was a holiday or a snow day, she was off, and she really liked that a lot. She was a dedicated employee. If they called her at 5 a.m. to be there at 6, she got ready and got to school. She got there. Her work ethic was amazing. I learned my work ethic from my mom and my father, who also worked his hind end off. My dad at one time had 3 jobs and was remodeling or building. No, he was fixing the house up that I live in now, because I am back at the house I grew up in as a caregiver. My mom, as I said, was very religious and would pray every day. And I would hear her pray and cry some mornings. And I didn't like to hear my mom cry, but she would just weep and pray. And talk in tongues. Now, if you don't know what that is, look it up. I'm not going to explain that. I grew up with that, and it's something unique to the Pentecostal religion, and it's very interesting. A lot of people make fun of it, but it's something unique. And my mom talked in tongues and prayed and had a very strong faith. She was a faithful mom, and she made mistakes. She had a bad temper. She had a hard time with my sisters, who had a lot of her in them. There's the fire from my mom's side of the family. We all have it. It's a really bad temper. We don't like being messed with, and we don't like people thinking they're better than us. And I find that in all of us, and we all strive to be a good person. But it's funny how we all have that trait, and I guess it comes from our lineage. But my mom, she was always trying to be the best, most honest person she could be. Like I said, she made some mistakes, and she had a big imagination, and she had some faults. She wasn't. My mom was not a perfect person, but she was perfectly human. That's what I want to say. She made her mistakes and tried to move on from them. And that's all you can do. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be back, and I'll talk some more about my mom. And I'm really enjoying this one. So I'll be back in a second. I'm going to take a breath. And I'm back again. I'm talking about my mom today. One of my absolute favorite subjects. One of my most beloved persons in my life. She's been my mom for 56 years, and I am her caregiver. Like I said, now she has Alzheimer's. I think as I was growing up, having a son for her was kind of a mystery. I think she had a relationship with her daughters, a closer relationship than with me, because I was very introverted, and I would often play by myself. I had friends, but they were usually kind of at school. I had a couple of really close friends. I think the closest friend I had was my friend Craig, who came to my house quite often, and I would go visit another friend named Richard, and my mom would take me over there sometimes. But for the most part, I was kind of a lonesome kid, and I think my mom worried about me a lot. She didn't understand me. I wasn't an athlete. I liked science fiction and monsters, and she kind of let my dad take control of my life. And for instance, she didn't make me go to church, because my dad didn't go to church. He really didn't believe in organized religion. He was a very religious man, but he didn't like to go to church. So oftentimes I would stay home with him while my sisters went to church. And my poor mom, I was an odd size, and she always had to buy odd size clothes. I don't remember the sizes I had. It was a slim size. I was very scrawny as a child. She couldn't get me to go outside a lot. She would be yelling at me. When I was younger, I take that back. When I was younger, I was an outdoor kid. I would, ride bikes and go exploring and climb trees. I'd climb a tree almost to the top of the tree, and she would have to come coax me down because I would get scared all of a sudden. And I remember that quite often. My mom also was probably the disciplinarian in our family. My dad didn't really discipline as my mom did, and man, she had a temper. So, you walked the line with her. My older sisters kind of clashed with her as they grew older in their teen years, because she really didn't push religion on my sisters. She didn't make them. The Pentecostal people usually wear dresses. My mom didn't make them do that. They wore them at church to be respectful, but they, did things teenage girls do. And when they were older, they wore makeup and all that stuff. I really do think my mom would have liked them to follow in the religion, but she let them have their own journey. I don't know that they see it that way, but I kind of do. Like I said, that hot-headedness, all of us have it, just like her. And I think all of us, I think we all live our life the way we want to. We are very strong individuals, and that's something I hope my sisters agree on as well, that we are. And I think that comes from my mom. And my dad, he oftentimes worked a lot, and he oftentimes would come home and watch TV, read the newspaper, whatever. And my mom was more of the, she cooked, she cleaned, she made sure we got to bed, and tucked us in. My dad would get us milk and stuff. I'm not saying he wasn't a part of our life, but my mom just was in charge of us. We were her children. And as my sisters moved out, I stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed, and much longer than I ever intended to. But the advantage I had with that was I got to know my parents as people as opposed to my parents. And the older I got, the more I knew about them and the more they talked to me about life. My mom one day looked at me when I was a teenager and she said, "I just don't understand you. You're so private." And I was just a teenage boy. I didn't feel comfortable talking to my mom about things. And my dad really didn't like to talk. So like I said, I was an introvert anyway. I kept things to myself. I'm still kind of that way to this day. Believe it or not, as much as I talk, I can go on and on about stuff for hours and really not having said anything. I'm sure you've noticed that in my podcast. But my mom, I found out, wanted to be a teacher. I might have said that already. I think I did, actually. But she wanted to be a teacher in life. That was her goal. And when she got the job at the grade school, I don't think she saw the irony in it. But she ended up working in the school system and befriending a lot of teachers. And I think getting that job, getting out of the house and being in the workforce, kind of got my mom out of her religious shell. She kind of grew as a person. More of her real self came out, her sense of humor and her, being around adults instead of being around kids. She could be Ann Riggs at school. She could be a person herself, and she wasn't someone's mother or someone's wife. my mom loved being a mom, and she loved my dad immensely, even though they clashed. My mom and dad argued so much. My dad was an introvert. My mom liked family. My dad didn't like company. My mom loved company. My mom loved going to church. Dad didn't like going to church. But somehow, they were made for each other. I guess they say opposites attract. That was true. My mom also was very, very smart and very, very good with money. She could make a buck go forever. And when she grocery shopped, she used coupons, and I mean, she could buy a lot of stuff for, the cheapest possible way. And she just was a whiz with money. And she was her church bookkeeper for a long time. And she kept very good records. She was very good at math, and she handled all the business affairs. My dad didn't like talk on the phone. And she didn't believe in handouts either. That's something that rang true with her through her whole life. As I finally moved out and had a nice house not nice, but I had a house across town, and I lived there for quite a long time. So Mom and Dad were, for the first time in their life, together by themselves in this house. And I'm sure there's an untold story there, because I wasn't home a lot. I was working, and I'd come over for supper, or I'd go shopping with him, or, we'd go shopping together, and we'd spend time. But for the most part, I was working, and I had my own life going on, and I really liked it. I'm not gonna lie. Some of my happiest times of my life were when I had my own house and my own life. That was just a great time. But my mom, she finally got on full time at the grade school as a cook, and my dad retired from his job, and their lives worked out that way, because she'd have to get up early in the morning. They started really early, I think 6 a.m., 5:30 a.m., something like that. So when she got home, she would be really tired, and my dad would cook supper, and then, they always worked together like that. My dad liked to cook. And they were just a good, perfect couple. I would like to say, too, my sister Lori had breast cancer, and I'd like to kill my mom too. It was a very stressful time, and my mom, she actually had 2 bouts of it, and my mom left to go help her on and off, and I had to spend a lot more time with my dad during that time. Actually, I believe I still was living at the house whenever that happened. So my dad, when my mom was gone, he just stopped. It just wasn't. He wouldn't even lay in the bed. He would lay on top of the bedspread. He wouldn't open. He loved my mom so much. It's funny. He just didn't quite work right without my mom. But my mom could leave and go be with my sister, or go visit her family, and my dad would sometimes not want to go, so she had to go by herself, and that used to make her so mad whenever he would do that. That was one of the things they argued about too. But he loved my mom a lot, and she loved him, and they would stand together if any of us came up against them. I mean, you didn't talk disrespectful without, them defending one another. So I was brought up to respect my parents. My parents became my best friends in life. As I grew older and we had a more adult relationship, they were there for me quite a bit. And I had quite a few lousy years with my job or what have you. And they stood by me and helped support me. And my mom prayed, she's always praying for me. There came a point when my grandma had dementia and my aunt lived by her and took care of her and, helped her out a lot. And the decision was to put her in a nursing home, and my mom just cried and cried and cried because she wanted to take care of her. She didn't want her to go into a home. But my father and I knew both that my mom couldn't do that. She was still working. I want to say she was still working at the grade school. And even then I knew that was a big responsibility to take on. And if my aunt said she needed to go there, that's where she needed to go, because I know my aunt is very level-headed, but my mom was acting on emotions, and my mom loved her mom so much. She loved my grandma immensely, and as it turned out, it was a good decision, and my grandma was well taken care of at the facility, and we would go visit quite often. And it was a joy for me, I know, to see my grandma. I love my grandma Qualls. That's another story. But I really love my grandma. It was very hard to watch her kind of fade away. But I had gone through that with my grandma. And little did I know I'd be going through it with my dad and my mom later. But that's part of life, I guess. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to talk some more about being a caregiver for my mom. I shall return in a little bit. I'm back talking about my mom. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about being her caregiver. As my mom and dad grew older, and I ended up moving back home because my dad, who is 7 years older than my mom, as I stated, started having a lot of health problems, and which caused him to lose a lot of weight. And my mom was having to take care of him more and more as his mind started to slip. I don't think my dad was ever diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, but he was, especially in his very late 80s, he was starting to forget, and my mom was increasingly having to take care of him. And with me working and things, I didn't realize how much she would have to do for him later in life. He got to where he developed a horrible cataract. And like me, he's blind in his right eye, which is another ironic thing about me and my dad. I said I'm blind in my right eye. He is blind in his right eye. But his good eye developed cataract, and he got to where he was just miserable. Couldn't see anything. He loved to watch football and all that. But we finally convinced him to get cataract surgery. And when I was putting his eye drops in, he would sit there with his head back, and I was like, Dad, you don't have to sit there with your head back. Get up and go eat supper. And when he did, I turned around and he fell and broke his hip. And that started the end of his life. Once you break your hip at that age, it causes all sorts of problems. And he rapidly went down, and that happened in March of 2016, and he was gone by May 7th, 2016. My mom had a hard time watching my dad in his final months. It started to really wear and tear on her heart and her mind, and she had signs of early dementia, early Alzheimer's before he broke his hip, and during that time she knew she was slipping, and she kept lamenting that she's losing her mind, and I was very dismissive of it. And I had moved back home at this point. I had sold my house and moved back home, and I was helping her with Dad. But she was doing weird things. She got a rash that was determined to be, or was diagnosed as being turkey mites, which is, look it up. I'm not going to explain turkey mites, but basically they burrow in your skin and they cause a rash. And it literally was driving her crazy, and she was so miserable. But she got to where she was claiming their heads were peeking out of the rash, and just really bizarre things. And I started to worry about her then, but it would come and go, and she'd be fine. The day my dad died, she prayed over him, and that was a horrible day for my family. I don't think I've cried so hard as looking at my dad laying there. But my mom said the most powerful prayer, and I'll never forget it. She loved that man so much. But we spent the days getting all the arrangements made, and she was handling herself really well. And we got through the funeral, and after the family left, and it was just me and her that evening, and she said, "Who did we bury?" And I said, "What?" And I really worried about her. I thought maybe she's just grieving so hard. Maybe, you making all these excuses. But that was the turning point that night. And the coming weeks and months, she just started really losing it. We finally ended up taking her to the doctor, and the doctor suggested we do the Alzheimer's test, and it's a series of questions, and she couldn't tell what time it was, and my sister was trying to help her, and the doctor kind of told her to stop, that this is how we test. So she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I didn't know what to think at that point. I am single. I've never had kids. I changed my nephew's diapers back in 1984. I didn't do any of that. And my mom, I'm a guy. My mom's a lady. My mom is very much a lady. So the whole prospect of me having to change her and all that stuff was in my mind, but I didn't have to do that at first. And at first my mom would wander out, and I was working midnight shifts, so I was having a hard time sleeping because she was either running out the door, or at this point I had 2 cats, and they were kittens, and she was letting them out, and I didn't want them outside, and I would constantly have to bring them back in. And she didn't want to sleep in her bedroom where Dad was, where their bedroom. So she would sleep on the couch. And her behavior became more and more irrational. And she was falling a lot at that point too. And she was like putting stuff on the stove. Like she would get our Mr. Coffee decanter and put it on the stove and forget about it and it would melt. And one time I caught her putting putting together ice cream with hand sanitizer and pickles. And I had to kind of stop that really quick. And I'm glad I was awake at the time when that happened. But she wandered uptown and fell, and she woke up thinking she heard my sister scream and ran through the alley, and it was cold outside, and my brother-in-law had to bring her back. I mean, it was just these things that began, it was just the beginning of this journey I've been going through with my mom. So, as time went on, she started losing her motor skills, and she eventually had a hard time getting up and would lay down a lot, and we had to help her. We had to get a porta potty, and she was having spells where she'd faint while she was going to the bathroom, and I'd have to call ambulances, and it just kept progressing worse and worse, and it was a financial strain for me because I was having trouble getting help, and I was having trouble finding people to watch her. My sisters were helping me, but my one sister just couldn't do it anymore. And my other sister was trying to help, but little did I know my youngest sister, Cindy, the one that's 6.5 years older than me, also, my sister Kim had lymphoma a few years back, but my sister Cindy also got lymphoma, and I didn't know how sick she was, but she ended up breaking down and she couldn't do it anymore. So I had a friend's mom came in the store and had told me she was looking for an elderly to take care of, and she ended up being my mom's sitter, and she was a really great woman. My friend, her son had passed away, but she also had a Pentecostal background, and her and my mom hit it off really well. And she really loved my mom, and I was lucky to have her, and she really helped me. But I paid her out of pocket, and that was a struggle those years. And then she couldn't do it anymore, so a young lady that I've known a while took over, and she did really well with my mom. Again, I don't know how I made it financially through those times, because I literally was paying out of pocket, working full-time. But eventually she left, and then I struggled with sitters, and my sister recovered or went in remission, and she was able to help again. So she has been, and we're at the point now my mom is bedridden, as I've said this before, bedridden, and she can no longer speak. I have to feed her. I know eventually if she continues to live, she'll forget how to eat, and that's probably when I'll have to check into putting her somewhere. I really don't want her to get to that point. But here's the thing, I'm not ready to let her go at this point. I love getting up and seeing her face, and she smiles at me, and I kiss her on the head every morning. I always check on her. Right now I'm working day shift, so I have to get up pretty early, and I always wake her up to make sure she's okay. And it's that little kiss on the head every morning means so much to me. And every now and then she has these little moments of, for instance, we were watching a movie, and the man on the TV said, "What's your name?" in the movie, and she says, "My name is Ann Riggs," just as plain as day. This was just recently. Or she'll look at me and say, "I love you, you're my son." And those moments mean so much to me, because it's hard when they forget who you are. It's hard when they forget where they are, but really when she doesn't know you anymore, it's upsetting. Although I'm very tough, and I knew this was coming. At this point of the game, I have to bathe her, clean her, wipe her, feed her. When I get home from work, I do this job, and I feel, and I said earlier, I've never had children. I feel very fulfilled by doing this. I really think we do not get through life without being responsible for somebody. But I feel so fulfilled, and I enjoy it so much. And I don't ever think that I know there'll be a time when she's gone. But it makes me so sad. And I love my mom. I would never do anything. Anyway, it's hard for me to talk about this. But I just want you to know, if you're going through this out here, hang in there. It's so worth it to take care of your loved ones. I understand some people can't do it. It's not for everybody. I surprise myself sometimes, but I truly enjoy taking care of my mom. It's just, and I feel blessed. I feel it's a blessing. She took care of me, but I'm not judging if you can't do it. Don't take it that way. Sometimes you have to do what's best. And I think I've done the right thing, because I thought about during COVID how you couldn't even see your relatives. You'd have to visit them through the window. You know, I couldn't even imagine how horrible that was for families. But I think I'm going to take a break and wrap this up. So I'll return in a little bit with my final thoughts. I'm back with my final thoughts. That last segment was hard for me. I'm sorry. I hope it made sense. It was long. But my mom is just my world right now, and I don't regret for 1 minute taking care of her at home. It's worth every struggle I've had. And like I said, I hope we don't get to the point where I can't take care of her anymore, because I don't know how I'm going to react to that. It's going to be a hard one. And it's also going to be hard when I have to let her go. I will be so lost. And when you lose both parents, I don't care how old you are, you feel like an orphan. But I've been so blessed to have wonderful parents in my life who loved me, who provided for me, who helped me, who nurtured me, who loved me so much. And I'm so thankful that I get to spend time with my mom on her 91st birthday. I have some cupcakes, and I've got a happy birthday banner for her, and little candles, and just a little present. She doesn't really know what day it is. I look at her and tell her it's her birthday, and she just looks at me blank. But I am so blessed being her caregiver. And I'm going to wrap it up, and I will talk to you on the next blog. Thank you for listening from my head to your ears. I am Leonard Riggs, and I will talk to you next time.